Hi and welcome to Steve's Wood Cave. In this video I'm going to talk about the relationship between the cutter position and the marker position, and I may have mentioned it in my first video, which was the introduction to the WoodRat and the setup and maintenance of the WoodRat. So now in this second video I will talk about the relationship between it and why we have this marker position on the left. So here we go. There are two cam clamps, the cutter position on the right and the marker position on the left here. With normal use of your router in a table or freehand routing, you'll know that you have to feed the cutter into the wood against the direction of rotation of the cutter for safety reasons. So if you were routing here, you'd go from left to right with the router on top. So that would give you your safe routing position. Going the other way, because the cutter is going in this direction, it will force it away from the wood and it will bounce off. It will either throw the piece of wood away if it's not held securely, or the router will just literally bounce off the side of the wood. So usually that's a pretty dangerous thing to do, but this going the opposite direction against the direction of the cut is called climb cutting, and this is something that the WoodRat is very good at doing, similar to a spindle moulder. So yeah, we can basically, because the wood's being held in this clamp. Incidentally, to put the workpiece in, you slide it in, push it against the face of the rat, and always put it in underneath this base plate. Slide it up until it meets. Your stock needs to be square. The end doesn't need to be square. It can actually, but the uppermost part of the wood needs to touch the underside. We can actually square the end of the wood off very neatly without any tear on here. So now I've got the piece of wood in the cutter position, I can now move the wood relative to the router bit. At the moment I've got an 8mm down cut spiral bit. So what I'm going to show you now is I'm going to move the router forward, bring the straight bit down onto the top of the end grain of the top end of this piece of wood, lock it off. I'm now going to 0, I'm bringing the depth stop down, lock it, set the gauge to 0. Now I can set that to 10mm. I'm going to undo it, bring it forward so that the router bit's in front, push it down, lock it, and then maybe you can see here. So hopefully you can see the router bit now is 10mm below the wood, and as I move forward I'm going to hit it. Okay, so now I'm going to plunge and wind the workpiece one way and then the other to show you with and without the breakout. So here you can see all this fluffy breakout as I've wound it from the centre of the board to the right hand side. So effectively we've gone around the top of the board anti-clockwise. And that's the conventional direction that you would route in. Now I'm going to show you going from the centre to the left, and that's climb cutting, and that should be very, very clean. So as you can see now, the edge of the board has absolutely no breakout. So that's the advantage of the WoodRat. You can cut perfect tenons. Okay, what I've done now is same piece of wood, turned it around the other way, and I've put an F on this front face. Top of the board is all square and flush underneath the base plate. So if I now move this across, what I'm doing now is lowering the router bit directly onto the top of the end grain. I'm going to lock it there. That's for zeroing the cutter onto the top of the board. I don't have another piece of wood the same thickness as I have here, so I've got just this other piece of pine which is cut at an angle, but never mind. Let's just assume that the thickness of this board is the board that I'm going to joint this board to. The thickness of this board we need to put into here now. Now that the bit is sitting on top of the board there, we want to undo this depth control and use that to use the actual board that we're going to join to dial up the thickness. So bring that down, lock it off, pull it out. Might need a bit of persuasion. So now when I plunge, I should plunge the thickness of the piece of wood that I want to join to. So what I'm going to do now is release it from there, go behind. This knob, by the way, goes in this slot and there's a hole there, and that's for locking off this, well, if you loosen it you can move the router backwards and forwards. So if you want to lock it in the front to back axis, you want to stop it from moving, you use one of these knobs. For this next operation you don't need that. What we're going to do is we're going to punch through. But first of all, from the back, I've just I'm going to lower it, so it's going to cut the depth of this other piece of wood that I've got here, which is probably about 20 millimeters. We're not going to go all the way through, we're going to go from the back to the front. Normally you'd want to go from the front to the back. We'll do that in a minute. So all I've done is I've gone in a few millimeters from the back towards the front. Now I'm going to come forwards, go back down to full depth, and now go from the front face through to the back. Now what we do is we remove it from the cutter position. Okay, this is pine, so it's always a bit tricky. I've gone through a knot there, so. But anyway, usually in hardwoods at least it leaves an absolutely perfect cut. So you can see now what we've done there. This now goes into the marker position on the left. So here's the piece of wood that we've just cut in the right hand clamp, which is the cutter position, and we're now going to place it without touching the handle. The handle must not be touched at this point. You can move the cam clamp. We set the piece of wood that we've cut flush with the top of the body. Oops. So we set with the F facing you as it was before. The top of the board flush with the top of the body of the rat. And now you take a sharp pencil and you go with the pencil at an angle so that it goes directly in inside there. And I should say you don't have to mark the bottom, you only have to mark the two vertical sides. This mark represents the size of the cutter used and not the size of the sockets and pins you're eventually going to make. This is a really important rule and it applies to all joints. We've also got to remember that the outside of the pencil line represents the cutting edge of the router bit. So we'll take this out now, again without moving the handle. Now you can see I've drawn a dovetail on there before when I was doing 3 dovetails, 2 different sized bits that I've used in the past, a small one and a big one. So now you can see that we are in the same position, and the straight lines represent our straight bit, which is 8mm diameter. So now I'm going to put this board back in the right hand cutter position, and remembering to keep the F towards you. Right, so now I'm going to move it. I'm going to actually shift this along now. So it doesn't matter, take any point you wish. Once again, I'm going to cut in through the back first and then through the front. And then, without touching the handle, remove it from the cutter position. This is the second one I've made, which is closer to the left hand edge. So don't forget that we've got the F always facing you. This was the number 1, and this is number 2. So now when we put it back in here, you should now be able to see that the pencil lines are inside, which they are. If I drop down slightly, you should see. So hopefully you can see here's the vertical lines, just there and there. And they're absolutely spot on with where we've cut with this second hole, this second slot. And this is because this has to line up because the 2 clamp fences have a fixed distance relative to one another between them. That they're always fixed to this sliding bar in the same place. And so they always move together. When the sliding bar is moved left, the sliding bar is moved right, and they go together. So basically these pencil lines represent the cutter, and the thickness of the line represents the cutter. So anything you want to do to the piece of wood in the cutter position on the right hand side, you just have to line it up here. You can draw lines on the end of your wood. There's various techniques for positioning this, but you can see it's very quick and very easy to create a comb joint from this kind of arrangement. So what you can do is with a baby square is transferred. So we had the lines drawn on the front face there and there. So what I've done now is I've just transferred them onto the top edge, and this helps when you've got a piece of wood in there, because obviously when it's up here somewhere and you've not got a slot cut already, you might have lines marked on the end of your wood to denote where you want to cut, and so you can easily now line up because you've transferred the lines onto the top. So now you just wind the handle, move the piece of wood along and line it up with these lines, and you know that the cutter is going to give you what's between the pencil lines plus the pencil lines. What I'll do now is I'm going to adjust this down slightly. You can see what's going on now, hopefully. So if I wind this to a new position, say to there, okay, that's where we're going to be cutting. When I take this piece of wood out of here, put it in the right hand cutter position. The trick is not to move the handle. So now take this out of here. Don't touch the handle. It's now lined up perfectly again with the pencil marks. Handle's not been touched. Slot's gone exactly where we said it would. So here we are, handle's not been moved. Pencil lines are exactly where we've set it. So hopefully you can see now that once you've cut your single initial marker piece, and you can use any piece of wood, it doesn't have to be the material that you're using in your project, but you just need to put it in the cutter position, bring the route a bit through, put it into this left hand marker position, draw the vertical lines. So you mark onto that. It doesn't matter what cutter you use. You can see there's a dovetail cutter being marked onto here. You know exactly where the bit is going to cut on your piece of wood. Just thought I'd show you also that you can make this registration mark in any piece of wood. This is just a thin piece of pine. It's quite long, doesn't matter, it's just pulled it out of the bin. It's not got a square end, so I'll show you how to square up the end. You can see it's slightly sloped, but hopefully it'll be all fine. So I'll just stick it in here, pass it up so it hits the underside of the base plate, and put my goggles on. There we go, it's got a nice square end now. So now I'm going to put that in. That sits beautifully square to the underside of the base plate. What I'm going to do now is just roughly centralise it, somewhere there. Okay, and again I'm going to go from the back forward just to do a relief cut, and I'll come to the front and go straight the way through. Okay, so there we go. I've not touched the handle. I'm going to put it in this side. virtually flush to the top. There you go. So we've not moved the handle up here, it's just on the right. You can see that the pencil marks line up exactly where it is. So before you make the sort of outline of your router bit on the front face of the rat, it doesn't matter what piece of wood, as long as it's got parallel sides, you can use it. Square off the top, cut through after depthing it to the workpiece thickness, and then draw the lines. Now obviously if this is a dovetail, you're going to have angled profile of the router bit, which is why the depth of cut is really important. With the straight bit it's not such a problem, although if you're jointing to the thickness of a workpiece to make comb joints or finger joints, then you do need to have the right depth. But now you can see exactly where the router bit's going to cut. Only time it's useful to have the actual workpiece in here, which is the full width of the workpiece, is when you are using that workpiece because you've already drawn some penciled lines across the top, across the end grain, to show where you want to remove material and where you don't want to remove material. So that's where you're using it basically as a template. So you can, if you've already done your router bit mark on the face of the machine with just a scrap like this, that's okay, just remove it, put your normal workpiece in here that's already marked up where you want to make the cuts, and then as you wind the handle left and right, you can line up your cuts in the template piece that's in this marker position, and put the real workpiece in the right hand clamp, which is the cutter position. So we're at the end of the video now, so just to recap, what we need to remember to do is when we're cutting the board, we can go in the opposite direction to the direction we normally route in, so the climb cut. So we can go basically looking at the front, this is the front of the board, we can go from the right to left and around the end of the board in a clockwise direction, whereas normally when you route you would be going the other way around. So that gives you a nice clean shoulder line, so you can make very, very nice tenons, rebates, whatever, rabbits, and within minutes you can create whatever you want. Very clean cut. Haunch, tenons, you know, you name it. When you're cutting a through joint like this, here's the front face of the board, always plunge the router in behind and go in about 3 or 4 millimeters, just to clean cut the back end, because if you go from the front straight through, then you will get some breakout. So to avoid that, go in from the back, go in a bit, go back, so you go down, put it in 3 millimeters, go back, go up, bring it over the top of the workpiece, down again, and then go in again. When you make your first cut, if you remember earlier in the video we made a single cut on the front face and pulled the bit through. We then didn't touch the handle, put it into the marker position, made it flush with the top surface of the rat, and then we drew the that was number one, we drew that onto the face by putting our pencil in. So it's important not to move the handle when you do that, because what you're doing there is you are basically repeating the position of the router bit relative to the piece of wood in the marker position. So you know exactly, if you're using this for guiding where you want to cut, then you need to keep it absolutely still, so the relative position is the same. Yeah, when you make that first reference cut, which you transfer to there. You need to depth the router to the thickness of your actual workpiece that you're going to be cutting in. Although we didn't mark the bottom of the slot, it's important to depth it to the actual depth of the thickness of the wood. So you need to do that as well. And also don't forget, remember that the pencil line is included in your cut. So the pencil line represents the outmost dimensions of the bit that you're using. So when you're putting a board in here as a template with marks on to guide where you cut, then you need to remember that the pencil lines represent the cutter. When you're doing work on the WoodRat, it's always important to remember which face you're putting in. So for some cuts you may not have symmetry, so if there's no symmetry and you put it in the wrong way around, then you're going to have the cut in the wrong place. So always important to label your boards with a simple squiggle or anything you like with a pencil, an F, whatever, doesn't matter. Probably best not to put any stickers on here because that might, if you're batching things up, then that might introduce some errors. So it's probably better just to use a pencil. So thank you for watching the video. I hope it's of some use to you. In subsequent videos I will talk in much more detail about the actual jointing techniques, but hopefully this video has given you some idea of how the cutter and marker positions relate to one another, and perhaps something will twig in your mind and make you realise what the use of it is and why it's so useful. But if not, then maybe one of my future videos showing you the actual jointing, I'll obviously do a through dovetail joint and show you how to do that. But for now, thank you very much, and please subscribe, like, comment, and I'll get back to you if you comment. And thanks very much for watching. See you next time.